What if I told you two siblings offered $50 million not for freedom, not for silence, but for erasure? Not of a person, but of a legacy. That's what the FBI now claims. That Tracy Reiner, Rob Reiner's own adoptive daughter, and his troubled son Nick Reiner, offered a staggering $50 million in hush money, bribes, and hidden donations to erase something far more damning than fingerprints. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. They wanted the files gone. All of them. Rob Reiner's files, his private records, his hidden audio logs, his encrypted drives, and more chillingly, his sealed Red River folder that allegedly contained the kind of secrets that could detonate careers, destroy reputations, and possibly, just possibly, expose crimes that were never supposed to see the light of day. But this story isn't about money. It's about betrayal. It's about what happens when a family built on fame and power implodes under the weight of its own secrets. So here's what we know. On the morning of Sunday, December 14th, authorities in Los Angeles were called to a gated $13.5 million estate in Brentwood. Inside, they found two bodies, Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, 70. Both had been stabbed multiple times. The cause of death was listed as multiple sharp force injuries. The manner of death, homicide. What followed was a scene straight out of a psychological thriller. The house was not ransacked. No valuables were missing. But something else had vanished. Rob's safe was open. His external drives were missing. His filing cabinet, empty. And the panic room? It had been accessed. Even more disturbing, their son Nick Reiner, 32, was found later that night in the guest house, covered in scratches. Disoriented. Silent. He was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. End of story, right? Not even close. Because what came next pulled in the entire Reiner bloodline, especially Tracy Reiner, Rob's adoptive daughter, the Hollywood producer, the insider, the one who had the keys to the kingdom. FBI sources now confirm that Tracy wasn't just another family member grieving in silence. She was part of the cover-up. According to leaked federal documents, Tracy and Nick jointly attempted to bribe federal agents and digital forensics experts to destroy, corrupt, or permanently erase certain sensitive files that belonged to Rob. Files that, until recently, no one even knew existed. What was in them? Why were they worth $50 million to make disappear? And how did one surviving daughter, Romy Reiner, end up being the one to turn in her own family? Because that's exactly what happened. According to the L.A. County Sheriff's Department, Romy was the one who discovered the bodies. And almost immediately, she told investigators, "There's someone dangerous in my family. Someone who needs to be the main suspect." That line alone triggered a massive shift in the investigation. It wasn't just a whodunit anymore. It became a race to uncover what Rob was hiding, who else had access to it, and why his own children, one biological, one adopted, were allegedly willing to risk everything just to erase his past. And here's where it gets darker. Those files Tracy and Nick wanted gone. They weren't just financial statements or family videos. They allegedly contained years of recordings, unfiltered journal entries, legal documents, and possibly unpublished material Rob was preparing to release. Material that could damage Hollywood elite, expose powerful players, and even implicate people in crimes that were, until now, buried under layers of silence. So why now? Why did Rob suddenly become a target? And how does a family so embedded in fame, prestige, and influence fall apart like this? Because when you start following the money, the $50 million trail, you begin to uncover a tangled web involving shell companies in Panama, secret offshore accounts, anonymous cryptocurrency wallets, and a trail of intimidation that even the FBI has called unusually aggressive. This wasn't just about money. It was about power and the desperation to hold on to it, even if that meant erasing your parents from history. So who really killed Rob and Michelle Reiner? Was it Nick? Alone? Was it a calculated team-up between Nick and Tracy? Or was someone else involved entirely? Because there's a rumor, deep inside the FBI case files, that the Reiners were being watched, that someone outside the family had been listening, recording, and waiting for the perfect time to strike. What was in those files? What was so explosive that Tracy, known for her calm, polished public image, allegedly screamed in a federal building. Just burn it all. You have no idea what's at stake. And more importantly, why does every agent who touched the case say the same thing? There's more to this than just a murder. In the next hour, we're going to unpack it all. The night of the murders, the hidden panic room, the corrupted security footage, the secret journal page burned in the fire pit, and the last 3 minutes of audio recovered from Rob's panic room recorder. An audio file so disturbing, even seasoned FBI agents were left shaken. You're about to witness the unraveling of a legacy, the betrayal of blood, and a desperate attempt to rewrite history with money, fear, and silence. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What really happened on the night Rob Reiner and his wife were murdered? Was it just another tragic family breakdown, or something far more sinister, something planned? Let's rewind the clock. It's Saturday night, December 13th, in Brentwood, California. A cool breeze brushes the palm trees lining the Reiner estate. The Reiners, Rob and Michelle, are said to be relaxing in their private media room, likely sipping tea, watching an old classic, something Rob directed, maybe The Princess Bride, or When Harry Met Sally. But outside the walls of their $13.5 million home, something was already off. A black SUV was seen circling the neighborhood 3 times between 8:30 p.m. and 9:15 p.m. No headlights, no plates. It never pulled into the driveway. It just watched. Across the street, a motion-triggered Ring camera caught it. At 9:22 p.m., the camera footage cut out. Meanwhile, inside the Reiner estate, everything seemed ordinary until it wasn't. At 9:40 p.m., security logs show that the alarm system was manually disarmed from the main control pad in the hallway. The code used? Tracy Reiner's. But according to Tracy, she wasn't even in the house that night. She told investigators she was in Santa Barbara for a production meeting and stayed at a resort with 2 friends, both of whom later refused to give sworn statements. Suspicious? You decide. And what about Nick? He lived on the same property, in the guest house behind the pool. A place that, according to the gardener, had become a dark cave, boarded windows, foul smell, weird noises at night. That night, Nick claimed he was asleep by 8 p.m., sedated after taking anti-anxiety meds and a few shots of vodka. But here's where the story fractures. Because at 10:07 p.m., a private security patrol drove by the estate and saw a man standing in the kitchen window, shirtless, sweating, pacing. That man wasn't Rob, and it sure as hell wasn't a stranger. The description matched Nick. When the patrol circled back 5 minutes later, the blinds were shut. Now let's fast forward. At 10:21 p.m., Romy Reiner, Rob and Michelle's youngest daughter, tried calling her mother. Just a casual goodnight check-in. No answer. She tried Rob's number next. Still no answer. Odd, but not alarming, not yet. At 10:44 p.m., Romy sent a text. Everything okay? Dad didn't call me back. Just checking. She never got a reply. Now let's talk about the sounds. Neighbors heard screaming. One neighbor, in a police statement, said, "I heard a woman scream. Like a real scream. Not someone watching a movie. I froze. Then it stopped suddenly. Not a whimper. Just nothing." That happened at 11:03 p.m. Another neighbor noted loud banging. Something shattering. Then silence again. Still, number 911 call was placed by anyone outside the home. Because this was Brentwood, people mind their own business. But inside the Reiner house, chaos had already unfolded. The final moments of Rob and Michelle's lives are still under heavy FBI review. But here's what the forensic team confirmed. Multiple sharp force injuries. Defensive wounds on both. Signs of a struggle on the second-floor landing. Broken lamp. Blood trail leading toward Rob's private study. And here's the kicker. The safe was wide open. Files were missing. 2 external hard drives. Gone. A laptop was smashed against the corner of the fireplace. An encrypted drive was left behind, heavily damaged, but not destroyed. The coroner's time of death? Between 11:15 p.m. and 11:45 p.m. Now here's where it all spirals into nightmare. At 12:22 a.m., Romy drove to the estate. Something told her to check. She rang the gate. No answer. She rang again. Nothing. Finally, she used the code her dad had given her. The gate opened. She parked. The house was dark. Not silent, dark. like someone had gone through and turned off every source of light. Except one. A soft glow was coming from Rob's office. When Romy walked in, she smelled something. Not just blood, not just fear. She said it smelled like fire and bleach. She followed the light. And then, she screamed. Because there they were. Rob and Michelle Reiner. On the floor. Arms reaching toward each other. Eyes open. Blood on the rug. Streaked like someone had tried to drag the bodies, then gave up. And behind Rob, a trail of smudged footprints leading to the back hallway. Romy ran. Called 911. The call lasted less than 90 seconds. But what she said to the dispatcher became the center of a firestorm. There's someone dangerous in my family. Someone who needs to be the main suspect. She didn't say Nick's name. She didn't say Tracy's. But detectives later said, the way she said it, she already knew. Police arrived within 7 minutes. They swept the house. No signs of forced entry. No broken locks. But guess where they found Nick? In the guest house. Passed out on the couch. One shoe on, one shoe off. His shirt had blood on the sleeves. When they shook him awake, he looked confused. Glassy-eyed. Smelled of liquor and burnt plastic. He said just 3 words. Where's my dad? But they weren't surprised. Because on the desk next to him sat a half-burnt notepad. And written on the last legible page were the words. She promised it'd be clean. No mess. We'll get to that in Chapter 7. Back in the main house, the forensics team found a trail of tiny black ash flakes near the back door. Burned documents. Someone had tried to destroy files, fast. They also found bleach stains near the safe. Someone had tried to wipe down the area where the drives had been removed. But not well enough. Partial fingerprints were lifted, and 2 of them belonged to Tracy Reiner. Now remember what we said earlier? Tracy claimed to be in Santa Barbara that night, but her fingerprints were fresh. The bleach trail led to the back patio. And the security log? The system was disarmed using her code at 9:40 p.m. The question is, did she come alone? Or was Nick already inside, waiting? FBI agents began to suspect something more than just an angry son had exploded that night. They suspected a coordinated plan. One that involved accessing Rob's private study, erasing files, and covering tracks. But here's what no one saw coming. The panic room had been accessed. That room was supposed to be soundproof, sealed, and invisible to anyone but Rob and Michelle. But the motion sensor inside it detected movement at 11:17 p.m. And when FBI agents reviewed the data, they realized something horrifying. The panic room's built-in voice recorder had been left running. It captured every word spoken in the house from 11:14 p.m. until 12:02 a.m. And it wasn't just screaming. It was plotting. Next, we dive into what the FBI called the most chilling evidence they've ever recovered in a domestic homicide. The dangerous file. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What's worth $50 million to delete? A crime scene can be cleaned. A reputation? Maybe repaired. But a file, especially this kind of file, could burn everything to the ground. This wasn't just a will. This wasn't just a hard drive full of tax records or screenplays. No. This was something far more volatile. When FBI agents finally accessed what remained of Rob Reiner's encrypted digital archive, specifically the folder marked Red River, they weren't looking for trouble. They were looking for a motive. What they found was a bombshell. But first, how did the FBI even recover it? Let's rewind to 48 hours after the murders. Inside Rob's personal study, beneath a false drawer panel in his oak writing desk, technicians located a damaged 5 terabytes solid-state drive. Melted at one end, but the core memory structure was intact. Forensics officers took it straight to Quantico, where their cybercrime division initiated Project Stonefall, a high-priority data recovery operation reserved for government-level breaches. But here's what nobody expected. The folder that kept resisting decryption wasn't labeled Will or Family. It was simply named Red River. At first, it looked like a misnamed archive. Just a few subfolders. Some jumbled file titles. But when decrypted, every folder, every file, every single entry was password-locked with a different code. Guess who had the passwords? No one. Not Tracy. Not Nick. Not even Romy. So how did the FBI get access? A clue came from Rob's longtime assistant, Eileen Masters. A quiet, aging woman who handled all his appointments, travel, and digital records. When she heard about Rob's death, she fainted at her desk. But once she regained composure, she told investigators. If Rob ever felt threatened, he would have locked everything under the river. That phrase, under the river, sounded cryptic, until someone noticed that Rob had once written a screenplay for a never-produced film titled Under the Red River. It was about a senator with dark secrets, a double life, and a vault of evidence buried beneath a cabin. That cabin, located at Red River, New Mexico. So FBI analysts ran the word redriver, and it unlocked the first gate. From there, things opened quickly. And what they found inside, let's just say it shook agents so hard, they immediately referred the case to 2 other federal departments. Because this wasn't just family dirt. It was a digital confession box. Here's what was inside. Personal recordings of Rob Reiner venting about his family, friends, and coworkers. Hidden financial reports showing offshore donations, some traced to political campaigns under different names. A long list of legal disputes quietly settled over the years, with NDA clauses and 6-figure payouts. And worst of all, a series of audio files simply labeled for my daughter. But here's where the contradictions begin. Which daughter? Tracy? Romy? Or someone else? One file in particular stood out, T_confession.mp3. When played, it began with Rob's voice. Calm, steady, older, clearly recorded in the last few months before his death. He says, if you're hearing this, then you already know. You know what Tracy asked me to do. And you know why I refused. The next 6 minutes are Rob laying out a story of power plays, emotional manipulation, and even blackmail by his own adopted daughter. He claims Tracy had been pressuring him for months to purge his digital archives, to burn anything that could link her to what Rob called the 98 operation. What was the 98 operation? That's still unclear. But a later file titled Billy.pdf contains a transcript of a phone call between Rob and Billy Crystal. Yes, that Billy Crystal, where Rob says, she was young. She knew too much. I should have stopped her, Billy. I should have said no. We'll dive into that in Chapter 9. But back to the Red River folder. Another major file, N_journal_2021.txt, appears to be a typed therapy journal by Nick Reiner. According to digital metadata, the journal was saved from Nick's iCloud onto Rob's personal hard drive sometime in late 2022, without Nick's permission. In it, Nick talks about feeling watched, about the pressure to be Reiner royalty, and most hauntingly, he writes, I caught Tracy reading Dad's safe files again. She laughed when I walked in, said none of it matters because she's already made arrangements if things go sideways. What arrangements? That question would be answered by a third file titled simply, Insurance.7z. This encrypted archive, when finally unpacked, contained the biggest twist of all. Inside were 17 wire transfer receipts, 3 Shell Corporation registration documents, 1 written agreement, and signed between a client and a cybersecurity firm based in Dubai. The agreement? To permanently erase a block of encrypted US-based data servers in the event of Rob Reiner's death. Yes, you read that correctly. Tracy allegedly had a contingency plan in place to wipe her father's legacy from existence once he was gone. And Nick? Based on the audio logs, he was terrified of her. In one secretly recorded conversation, captured on a backup mic in Rob's office, Nick is heard whispering, she's going to do it, Dad. She doesn't care. You think this is about your legacy? It's about her name surviving yours. To which Rob replies, if either of you touches that archive, you won't survive the fallout. That file was named Fallout.mp3. So what does this all mean? Why would Tracy, someone who grew up in Hollywood, worked alongside her father, and enjoyed the benefits of the Reiner name, go this far? According to FBI psychologists reviewing the case, control may be the key. Tracy reportedly saw Rob as someone with too much unfiltered power, someone who had grown careless about what he recorded, saved, or shared. And in Hollywood, where power lives and dies by perception, one leak can destroy everything. But the real shocker? Tracy wasn't acting alone. Remember that $50 million bribe? Bank records now show joint account withdrawals made by Tracy and Nick days before the murder. Money that was immediately sent offshore, into accounts linked to a private data erasure firm. The firm? Called Nemesis Solutions. Their slogan? What never existed can never hurt you. Think that's chilling? It gets worse. The last file in the Red River archive was timestamped 11:32 p.m., December 14th. Exactly 13 minutes after Rob and Michelle were estimated to have died. So who saved that last file? And why was it named tr_final.mkv? We don't know yet. Because it's encrypted with a passcode the FBI hasn't cracked. Not yet. But the fact that a file was created post-mortem? It suggests someone else was in that house. Alive, calm, and uploading. Coming up, we're going to dive deeper into that final file, and more importantly, the $50 million offer made to erase it. The secret agents. The whispered conversations. The offshore offers. And the moment Tracy allegedly told a federal agent, "You don't want to see what's on that drive. Trust me, everyone has a price. What's yours?" But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What do you offer when silence is no longer enough? When threats don't work? When tears don't work? When denial collapses under evidence? You offer money. A lot of it. And according to what investigators in this fictional story would later describe as the most audacious attempt to obstruct justice they'd ever seen, the number wasn't vague. It was specific. $50 million. Not whispered. Not hinted. Offered. The moment the FBI realized the Red River archive couldn't be quietly buried, everything changed. What had started as a homicide investigation mutated into something far larger, something that triggered federal protocols reserved for national-level corruption cases. Because money doesn't move like that unless someone is desperate. And desperation leaves fingerprints. The first red flag appeared just 72 hours after the murders. A mid-level federal contractor, fictional name, fictional role, was flagged during a routine financial compliance sweep. His account received a consulting inquiry from a Shell Foundation registered overseas. On paper, it looked clean. Cultural preservation, film heritage, digital archiving. But buried in the contract language was a single line that made internal auditors freeze. Permanent data neutralization services. That phrase doesn't appear in legitimate contracts. It appears in cover stories. Within hours, the FBI's internal ethics unit was alerted. And within a day, the contractor was sitting in a windowless room, sweating through his shirt, repeating the same sentence over and over. "I didn't take anything. I just listened." Listen to what? According to his statement, he was contacted by an intermediary claiming to represent private family interests. The meeting was arranged quickly. No emails. No texts. Just a burner phone and a location change twice before arrival. A quiet office suite. No signage. No cameras visible. And two people waiting inside. One calm. One restless. In this fictional narrative, the calm one did most of the talking. The offer was framed like a favor. Like a business proposal. Like a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over before it became unpleasant. The files, they said, were emotionally sensitive. The recordings were misinterpreted. The archive was dangerous in the wrong hands. And then came the line that changed everything. "We're prepared to donate $50 million to causes you care about if the archive is deemed unrecoverable." Not destroy evidence. Not obstruct justice. Deemed unrecoverable. Legal language. Clean. Slippery. The contractor didn't agree. He didn't refuse either. He asked for time. And that delay saved him. Because within hours, that burner phone lit up again. This time, the tone shifted. What had been polite became sharp. What had been calm became urgent. Deadlines were mentioned. So were consequences. The FBI didn't just want to know who made the offer. They wanted to know how deep it went. That's when financial analysts started pulling threads. In this fictional story, they discovered a pattern, coordinated withdrawals from multiple accounts tied to family trusts, production residuals, and offshore holdings that had been dormant for years. Money that hadn't moved suddenly began flowing. Not in one lump sum. In pieces. 5 million here. 3 million there. 12 million routed through a European arts nonprofit. Classic layering. But the most chilling part wasn't the money. It was the timing. The first transfer was initiated less than 12 hours after the estimated time of death, meaning someone wasn't grieving. They were executing a plan. In parallel, fictional investigators uncovered something even more disturbing. A pre-drafted digital loss declaration filed with a private cybersecurity firm months earlier. It outlined steps to take in the event of unexpected death. It listed server locations, backup redundancies, kill switches. Someone had planned for this scenario. And the name on the authorization line? Initials only. TR. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, why would anyone prepare to erase data before a crime ever happened? Unless they knew the data would become dangerous. Unless they believed one day it would have to disappear fast. This is where the story shifts from emotional to surgical. Because according to this fictional narrative, investigators began to realize the bribe wasn't about avoiding prison. It was about controlling the narrative. The files didn't just contain secrets. They contained leverage. Audio that contradicted public timelines. Documents that challenged carefully constructed reputations. Private admissions that were never meant to be heard. And here's the contradiction that shook everyone. If the archive was meaningless, why spend $50 million to erase it? If it was harmless, why panic? Why move money in the dark? Why pressure people who couldn't even access the files? That contradiction became the spine of the case. And then came the second approach. This time, not to a contractor, but to a federal liaison. A dinner invitation. Public place. Crowded restaurant. Plausible deniability. No numbers were spoken out loud. Just phrases. We want closure. We want to protect the family. We don't want innocent people hurt. Then a folder slid across the table. Inside, not cash, commitments, charitable pledges, campaign donations, endowments, all contingent on one thing, a technical ruling, a finding that the data was corrupted beyond forensic value. That ruling never came, because the liaison was wired. Every word recorded, every pause captured, including the moment the calm voice finally cracked. What happens, the voice asked, if the files leak? The liaison didn't answer, because the answer was obvious. Everything would burn. And that's when the FBI, in this fictional world, understood the scale. This wasn't a cover-up after the fact. This was a containment operation, one that had been waiting, one that assumed cooperation. But something went wrong, because someone else knew about the files. Someone who wasn't supposed to. Someone who didn't want them erased. Someone who had already spoken to police the night of the murders. Romy. Up to this point, she had been treated as a witness. But now, investigators started seeing her differently. Not as a bystander. As a variable. Because while others were trying to erase the past, she was trying to expose it. And according to this fictional storyline, she had already made a copy. Not of the entire archive. Just one file. The one created at 11:32 p.m. The one labeled TR_final. Which brings us to the moment that fractured the case wide open. A secure FBI office. A sealed laptop. And an alert that appeared without warning. External device detected. Someone, somewhere, was trying to upload something. And whatever it wasn't supposed to exist. But what came next would change everything. Because the file didn't just contain evidence. It contained a voice. And once it was heard, nothing could be taken back. She didn't just find the bodies, she found the truth. But what happens when the truth shatters your own bloodline? That's the impossible position Romy Reiner found herself in on the night of December 14th, when she walked into her parents' Brentwood estate, and into a living nightmare. And now, she's the only one left with a clean name, a clear voice, and a memory of that night burned into her soul like a scar that won't heal. But Romy's story isn't just heartbreaking. It's damning, explosive, and according to this fictional FBI narrative, it might be the only reason the case didn't vanish into silence. Because she didn't just find her parents' bodies. She also found what someone was trying to erase. Let's go back to the exact moment she stepped through the front door. 12:22 a.m. Romy unlocks the front gate of the estate using a code her father gave her months earlier. She parks quietly. No lights. No signs of life. Everything is wrong. The curtains are pulled in rooms that usually glow until midnight. The porch lights, which Rob insisted never be turned off, are dark. And most importantly, their dog, Chewy, isn't barking. Romy later said, Chewy always barked. He barked at the UPS guy. He barked at wind. But when I got there, silence. She stepped out of the car anyway, telling herself it was nothing. But her body already knew. In her statement, she said, it felt like something was watching me. Not from outside. From inside the house. She used the side entrance. One that led directly into the hallway between the kitchen and her father's office. That's when she noticed the faint light coming from the study. She called out softly, "Dad? Mom?" No answer. Her first thought wasn't death. It was a break-in. Or maybe a medical emergency. But then she stepped into the study, and what she saw nearly dropped her to her knees. Blood. Everywhere. Not messy like in horror films. Precise. Streaked. Wiped in places, as if someone had tried to clean up. And then gave up halfway through. Her mother, Michelle, lay crumpled near the fireplace. A gash across her collarbone. Eyes open. A look of horror frozen on her face. Her father, Rob, was just a few feet away, lying on his side, one arm outstretched, as if he'd been trying to reach her. There were defensive wounds on both. Scratches. Bruising. A broken trophy on the floor. One of Rob's old film awards, shattered, as if it had been used as a weapon and then discarded. Romy didn't scream at first. She couldn't. She said later in her official statement. It felt like someone had cut the air out of the room. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. I just shut down. Until she saw something else. The safe. It had been opened. Cleanly. No signs of prying or damage. Whoever had accessed it knew the combination. And the contents? Gone. Everything. The legal binders. The backup drives. The folder labeled Estate Transition 2024. All missing. Romy finally backed away, pulled out her phone, and dialed 911. The recording, which later leaked to the media, was brief. She whispered, "My name is Romy Reiner. I'm at my parents' house. They're both. I think they're dead. There's blood. It's my family. I think I know who did this." Those final words? They detonated through the investigation like dynamite. Because she didn't say, "I don't know." She said, "I think I know." The responding officers arrived within 7 minutes. Romy met them at the door, hands shaking, barely able to speak. But even through the haze of trauma, she said one thing, clearly, repeatedly. "You need to check the guest house. Check it now." When they opened the guest house door, there was Nick, on the couch, shirtless, dried blood on his wrists, reeking of whiskey and something bitter. His first words were not of confusion. They were quiet, cold, direct. "Is she dead?" The officer who cuffed him later said. "I'd arrested dozens of men." But that wasn't shock. That was expectation. But what really sealed Romy's credibility wasn't what she saw. It was what she saved. Because before police arrived, before the chaos unfolded, before the media even got wind of the tragedy, Romy had done something most people in shock would never think to do. She looked at her father's desk, and she noticed a USB key wedged beneath the keyboard tray. It had a red sticker on it, with one word, "Copy." She took it, slipped it into her purse, and when FBI agents arrived, hours later, she handed it over. No lawyers, no hesitation, no negotiation. Just, "This might help." He was working on something. I don't know what, but it scared him. That USB key, fictionally referred to in this story as Copy Drive 7, contained a backup of select files from the now infamous Red River archive. It wasn't complete. It didn't include the final video, but it had snippets, audio clips, notes, outlines, scanned contracts, and one folder titled TR Assets. It was filled with receipts, travel logs, payment history, all tied to Tracy Reiner. Romy hadn't just found her parents. She'd stumbled across the motive. Now let's talk about her interview. It took place 48 hours after the murder. She was seated across from 2 FBI agents. No lawyers present. She waived her right to representation. She simply said, "I just want to tell the truth." The agents asked her to recount the past few weeks. What had changed? What tensions she'd noticed? Here's what she said. Tracy had become obsessed with her father's legacy. She'd made veiled threats. "If he ever drags us down, I'll make sure he takes the fall alone." She'd demanded that Romy sign a new NDA, something Rob had never asked of her. And she'd mentioned, chillingly, "You don't know what's in Dad's files. But I do. And if you ever want to work in this town again, you'll pretend they don't exist." Romy refused. A week later, Rob stopped speaking to Tracy entirely. And 3 days after that, he was dead. But the most disturbing moment came when Romy recalled something Tracy said at Thanksgiving, just 3 weeks earlier. They were sitting at the table. The mood was tense. Rob and Michelle were discussing downsizing, simplifying the estate, updating the will. And Tracy leaned in, smiling politely, and said, "You know, Dad, if anything ever happened to you, your files would be the real funeral. Silence fell. Nobody laughed. Rob looked up, locked eyes with her, and whispered, "That's why I have backups." Romy told the FBI she remembered that moment like a gunshot. And now, with her parents gone, it haunted her. So why does Romy matter in this story? Because in this fictional expose, she isn't just a witness. She's the one thing Tracy and Nick didn't account for. A survivor who refuses to be silent. She could have hidden the USB. She could have fled the country. She could have said, "I didn't see anything." But she didn't. She chose to speak. And now, her testimony is the spine of the entire federal case. Because while others were deleting, Romy was preserving. And the more she remembered, the clearer the picture became. But there's one thing Romy hasn't spoken about publicly. One file on the USB that she viewed, just once, before handing it over. It was labeled, "Last night, Romy.mp3. She won't say what's in it. She won't say who recorded it. Only that it made her sick to her stomach. And that after hearing it, she knew exactly who to name as the dangerous person in her family. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. How well do you know someone who shares your last name? Is blood thicker than betrayal? Can a daughter become the architect of a family's undoing? In this chapter, we crack open the double life of Tracy Reiner. And what we find inside isn't just complex. It's calculated. Because behind the Hollywood smile, the red carpet poses, and the polished IMDb profile, was a woman building an empire on secrets. And for the first time in this fictional expose, we reveal just how far she was willing to go to protect it. Let's start with the image. Tracy Reiner, adopted daughter of Rob Reiner, an actress, producer, philanthropist, raised in one of Hollywood's most powerful families. Surrounded by fame, backed by legacy, she worked on major films, supported causes, attended elite galas. But under the surface, there were whispers. And now those whispers are speaking loudly. Because according to FBI sources in this fictional narrative, Tracy's name didn't first appear in connection to Rob Reiner's murder investigation. It appeared in a separate sealed probe, months before the deaths. A probe into undisclosed political donations, suspicious financial activity, and encrypted communication apps used to sanitize project history from high-level film deals. She wasn't the target at first, but she quickly became a person of interest. Why? Because money was moving in circles that didn't make sense. Foundations that didn't exist 3 months earlier suddenly receiving hundreds of thousands in grants. Production deals that began and ended within 72 hours. And always the same pattern, shell companies. One step removed from visibility. Just enough to shield, but never enough to fully disappear. But it wasn't until investigators began digging into Tracy's inner circle that things turned dark. Because people started talking. Not on the record, not under oath, but off the books, in whispers. And here's what they said. She controlled everything. That's how one former assistant, let's call her Claire, described working for Tracy. "I wasn't just scheduling meetings or travel. I was ghostwriting NDAs, shredding files. Once I even had to fly to Atlanta just to pick up a hard drive, no questions asked." Claire left after 6 months. No exit interview, no severance. But she did take something else. A backup of Tracy's encrypted contacts file. She never turned it in until after the murders. And when she did, investigators found names. Lots of them. Agents, bankers, lawyers, politicians, even Rob's own legal team. People who shouldn't have had any reason to be in Tracy's private Rolodex. And yet, there they were. Let's talk about control. Because according to this fictional case, Tracy wasn't just cleaning up after Rob. She was managing him. Sources close to the Reiner family described moments of tension in the final year. Tracy demanding access to Rob's estate planning files, hiring private IT teams to optimize his cloud storage, only to encrypt and relocate massive folders without telling him, convincing him to fire 2 longtime staffers for security concerns, only to replace them with people loyal to her. At one point, Rob even reportedly told a friend, "She's not helping anymore. She's pruning." What did he mean by that? According to insiders, she was editing his life in real time, removing obstacles, erasing evidence, rewriting relationships. Now here's where things twist further. Tracy once led a production firm, fictionally titled Nightfield Media, On paper, it was a boutique film incubator. But financial audits showed that the firm never actually produced a single feature-length film. What it did do: purchase private server space, pay high-level consultants for discretionary research, allocate significant funds to a consulting group registered in Luxembourg, flagged by international watchdogs for data laundering. Tracy was questioned about these anomalies months before the murders. She claimed they were tax errors, old deals, misunderstood. The inquiry stalled. But after the murders, those same investigators reopened her file. And this time, they connected the dots between Nightfield Media and a consulting group called Caldera X. What does Caldera X specialize in? According to fictional documents, digital sanitization. That's not just erasing files. That's reconstructing narratives, metadata manipulation, image scrubbers, email thread reconstruction, services that cost six figures per use, services that were, coincidentally, engaged by Tracy Reiner in early December, 2 weeks before her father's murder. She claimed it was for a film project, but no such project exists. And Caldera X's invoice? It listed the job as Vault Purge Protocol. Let's rewind briefly to 2021. Tracy allegedly attended a closed-door retreat in Big Sur, hosted by unnamed producers and former intelligence consultants. Publicly, it was a workshop on crisis leadership. Privately, it was something else. One attendee, who later turned informant, said it was about legacy management, how to protect the brand when a family member becomes a liability. The agenda included panels on reputational crisis suppression, controlled media leaks, social engineering through digital platforms. And Tracy? She didn't just attend. She led one of the panels. The name of her session? Silence is a family value. Now let's talk about her relationship with Nick. Because despite public statements suggesting she and her brother were distant, they weren't. Not according to shared financial holdings. Not according to joint offshore investments in a company called Ouroboros Capital, a firm with no physical office, but an alarming portfolio of short-term cyber contracts. More importantly, Nick was listed as a silent co-founder. That's right. The same man arrested for stabbing his parents was financially tied to his sister in a digital cleanup firm. Coincidence or coordination? But perhaps the most telling evidence of all comes from Rob himself. In a recording found inside the Red River archive, Rob says, "Tracy's not protecting me anymore. She's protecting the version of me she wants people to remember. But the truth? She can't delete that. Not all of it." He pauses, then adds, "I just hope Romy understands. I kept the files for her, because someone needs to know what really happened." The implication? Tracy wanted to control legacy. Nick wanted to destroy shame. And Rob? He wanted someone, anyone, to know the real story. So who is Tracy Reiner? In this fictional exposé, she is not just a grieving daughter. She is a strategist, a fixer, a revisionist, one who thought she could rewrite history using cash, contracts, and controlled narratives. But what happens when the one thing you can't control, the truth, finds its way into the light? What happens when your sister refuses to stay silent? When the file you thought was destroyed reappears in a courtroom? When your own father's voice returns from the grave to point the finger? Because the final clue wasn't hidden in encrypted drives. It was hidden in a document marked Executor Override. A document Rob signed. That changed everything. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What turns a son into a suspect and a suspect into a threat? Nick Reiner's story isn't one of sudden collapse. It's a slow-motion implosion, the kind you only recognize after the dust has already settled. To the world, Nick was the troubled son. To insiders, he was the ticking clock everyone ignored. But what if Nick's descent wasn't just a personal tragedy? What if it was weaponized by the very people who claimed to love him? And what if, in the final weeks of Rob and Michelle Reiner's lives, Nick was no longer just unstable? He was being used? Let's begin with the facade. Nick Reiner, writer, producer, son of a Hollywood titan. He'd survived addiction, overcome rehab, spoken about his journey. He even co-wrote a semi-autobiographical film, Being Charlie, about a young man struggling with substance abuse. For a time, it seemed like redemption. But behind the scenes, that redemption was manufactured. According to fictional accounts from hospital insiders, Nick had relapsed 4 times in 3 years. Each time, the incident was kept quiet, erased from digital logs, reworded in medical records as stress-related. And every time, the cleanup crew included Tracy. She handled press, suppressed rumors, paid off photographers. But not out of compassion, out of necessity, because a scandal around Nick could trigger something far more dangerous. A re-examination of Rob's estate. At the heart of the Reiner legacy was a trust, a meticulously crafted financial structure that relied on public image, tax exemptions, and public goodwill. If Nick collapsed again, the trust risked collapse too. So he wasn't just protected. He was quarantined. And where better to hide a liability than in the guest house? Now let's talk about the guest house. It wasn't a retreat. It wasn't a safe space. It was a holding pen. Friends said Nick was barely seen during the last 6 months before the murders. He rarely left. Groceries were delivered. Curtains stayed drawn. No visitors, except Tracy. And those visits? According to a fictional neighbor, they often ended with shouting. She'd pull up in that black car, slam the door, march inside. 30 minutes later, she's gone. And Nick? You'd hear glass break. But the pattern wasn't just verbal. It was digital. FBI cybercrime investigators uncovered a trail of messages from Tracy to Nick in the encrypted messaging app Verity, a secure platform designed for high-risk communication. The messages were cryptic, short, controlling. Not yet. Be ready. Stay quiet. You'll get everything. The last message, dated December 13th at 11:06 p.m., read, "It's happening. Don't panic." 4 minutes later, Rob and Michelle Reiner were stabbed to death. Coincidence? Or coordination? Let's rewind. Nick was 32 at the time of his arrest. But emotionally, he was frozen somewhere around 16. Court-ordered psychiatric evaluations, fictionally obtained for this exposé, described Nick as emotionally arrested, chronically paranoid, and possessing deep unresolved paternal resentment. In one session, he told a psychologist, "I don't know who I am without him, and I hate him for it." And in another, "Sometimes I dream that he disappears, and everyone finally sees me." These weren't just cries for help. They were flashing red lights. But no one acted, because Nick's silence was more useful than his outbursts. As long as he stayed contained, the narrative remained intact, until he stopped cooperating. In the fall of 2024, something snapped. Nick reportedly confronted Rob during a family gathering, screamed at him, accused him of withholding money, claimed Tracy was plotting to cut him out of everything. A source who was present said, Nick yelled, "I'm your son too," over and over again. Rob just looked tired. Michelle cried. The next day, Rob reportedly emailed his lawyer, "We need to revisit the will. I don't think Nick should be involved anymore. Not like this." That will revision, never finalized, became a central mystery of the investigation, because one draft copy was found, scanned, signed, but missing the notarization page. Someone had removed it. Tracy claimed she never saw the revised version. Nick said he barely knew what was going on. But the timeline? It tells a different story. Rob emailed his assistant the draft at 11:03 a.m. on December 13th. By 7:48 p.m., a USB drive containing the draft was plugged into Nick's laptop. Forensics confirmed it. Someone had access, and that someone didn't want the revision to survive. Now let's talk about the final trigger. On the day of the murders, Rob and Michelle reportedly planned to meet with their attorney about transferring certain digital assets, specifically Rob's Red River archive. The plan was to lock the archive under Romy's digital authority, making her the sole controller in case of Rob's death. That meeting? Cancelled. By whom? A call came into the attorney's office that morning, pretending to be Rob. The voice was distorted. Digital noise masked the audio. Caller ID, spoofed. The cancellation was brief. Change of plans. We'll reschedule after the weekend. The appointment was never remade. The archive was never transferred. That night, Rob and Michelle died. And Nick was seen on security footage, grainy, corrupted, standing in the hallway near the office at approximately 11:14 p.m., just minutes before the panic room recorder captured the sound of screams. When the FBI found Nick hours later, passed out in the guest house, he was surrounded by shredded papers, empty bottles, and something else. A charred notepad. The top sheet was gone. But the imprint on the page below, recovered using forensic light tools, read, She promised me it'd be clean. No mess. I wasn't supposed to see them like that. Handwriting confirmed. Nick's. And yet, he denies everything. He says he doesn't remember writing that. Doesn't remember that night. Doesn't remember anything after dinner. But here's the problem. A neighbor's Ring camera caught audio at 11:26 p.m. It captured someone sobbing. A male voice, saying the words, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Then silence. Then footsteps. Then a car door closing. 15 minutes later, Romy arrived. 20 minutes after that, the police. So was Nick the killer? A pawn? A puppet? A patsy? Or was he something worse? Someone broken, used, then unleashed? In a leaked transcript of his first interrogation, he said, I told her I wasn't ready. I told her I didn't want it to happen like this. Investigators asked, didn't want what to happen? Nick went silent, then whispered. She said it was the only way we'd both be free. When asked who she was, he said nothing. But his lawyer, privately, told agents, there's more going on here than just a mental break. You need to look at what she gave him, what she told him. Because here's the twist. Toxicology reports later found traces of Mebikar in Nick's bloodstream, a drug rarely prescribed in the U.S., known for suppressing emotional response while keeping a subject calm. The dosage? Untraceable unless you're looking for it. The prescription? No record. The source? Still unknown. But the symptoms? Disassociation, foggy memory, reduced empathy. Exactly how Nick described his state of mind the night of the murders. Someone gave him that drug. Someone primed him. Someone pulled the pin and let him fall. Nick wasn't just spiraling. He was falling on cue. And the woman standing nearby, watching, smiling, handing him a lighter and whispering, now they'll finally hear your story. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. One sentence. That's all it was. Not a confession. Not a name. Not even a full paragraph. Just one burned, half-legible sentence scribbled on a torn notepad page. But it changed the course of the entire investigation. Because sometimes, the truth isn't found in hard drives or hidden folders. Sometimes, it's hidden in ashes. Let's set the scene. The sun had barely risen over Brentwood when FBI forensic analyst Callie Brunner stepped into the backyard of the Reiner estate. She wasn't looking for evidence of murder. That had already been established. She was looking for intent. What did the killer, or killers, do after the murders? What were they trying to hide? That's when she saw the fire pit. It was cold, barely used, but the ash inside, still warm. And on top, a pile of burned papers, twisted staples, and a melted plastic binder clip. At first, it looked like junk, routine destruction, but when she sifted deeper, she found it. A spiral notepad cover, half-charred. Inside, most of the pages had disintegrated, but one was still partially intact, stuck to the page beneath it. And on that page, a single sentence, scrawled in what would later be confirmed as Nick Reiner's handwriting. She promised me it'd be clean. No mess. But now there's blood everywhere. Let's break this down. She. Not they. Not we. She. He didn't write a name, but the implication was obvious. Tracy. And the phrase, she promised me, suggests coordination. A plan. An agreement. Not a solo act of rage, but something premeditated, controlled. And then the follow-up. No mess. This wasn't about violence. It was supposed to be clean, surgical, quiet. But something had gone wrong. There was blood. Everywhere. So here's the question. Was Nick talking about the actual crime scene? Or was he referring to the emotional aftermath? Investigators believe it was both. And here's why. When analysts reconstructed the pattern of destruction in the fire pit, they identified at least 27 partially burned documents. Among them, a photocopy of Rob Reiner's draft will, 2 legal letters addressed to Romy, and signed but watermarked with Rob's law firm's logo, an email thread between Rob and an unknown recipient with the subject line, "If something happens to me, this is what you need to know," and fragments of what appeared to be a psychiatric report. Name redacted, but language matched a previous evaluation of Nick. Who burned them? According to one FBI timeline, Nick would have had about 25 minutes between the murder and Romy's arrival. But that wasn't enough time to locate, sort, and destroy specific documents, unless someone already planned it, unless someone already gathered them. Which leads us to a chilling possibility. The page was planted, not the notepad itself, but the quote. A forensic linguist hired by the FBI reviewed other samples of Nick's writing and found something disturbing. He rarely used the word clean, but Tracy? In emails, memos, and text messages, it appeared constantly. Make the handoff clean. Presentation should be clean. No mess. No cleanup. It was her language, her phrasing. So what if Nick didn't write the page? What if Tracy did? What if that note, found in ashes, partially saved, was actually meant to frame Nick? To push the narrative that he lost control, that he made the mess, that she wasn't even there. But here's the twist. That page was missing from Nick's notepad. And when the notebook was recovered from the guest house, half burned on the floor, it matched perfectly, meaning the page had been torn from his notepad. But the ink? It wasn't consistent with the rest of the journal. Further analysis revealed that the ink on the torn page came from a different brand of pen than the rest of the notepad. In short, the handwriting was his. The words were hers. The timing, deliberate. But the mystery didn't stop there. Next to the fire pit, buried beneath cold charcoal and damp leaves, agents found something even more damning. A flash drive. It was scorched, warped, almost unrecognizable. But the label, still faintly visible, read, Executor Override. And when FBI tech teams recovered fragments of its contents, they discovered it was a replica of the digital revision Rob had emailed his lawyer. The one that cut Tracy and Nick out of estate control. The one that transferred Rob's archive and legacy to Romy. The one they never wanted to see daylight. In a folder titled Inheritance Transfer, Rob detailed his reasoning. Here's what one recovered line said. If you're reading this, I've likely passed. I am choosing Romy because she is the only one who hasn't tried to rewrite my past. Chilling, painful, final, and completely damning. So who burned the flash drive? Why destroy a digital document unless it had power? And more importantly, why burn it outside? Why not just delete it? Because here's the FBI's theory. Someone wanted it found. They wanted a clue, visible, obvious, to steer suspicion, but only just enough to point at Nick. Not Tracy. Never Tracy. Until the page survived. That single page broke the illusion. And the minute analysts proved that it was written with two different pens, the narrative cracked. What started as a confession became a forgery, a planted piece of evidence, a setup. Let's pause here. Imagine being Nick. Addicted, sedated, broken, watching your parents die, not understanding what just happened, then waking up with blood on your hands, and a plan already in motion to make you the villain. This is what FBI profiler Dr. Lorraine Shaw called murder by manipulation. In a leaked analysis, she wrote, Nick Reiner is not an innocent man, but he may not be a guilty one, either. He was volatile, vulnerable, the perfect scapegoat, because while he was spiraling, someone else was staging, arranging, burning, cleaning, until one page refused to burn, and told a story no one expected. So what happened next? Investigators reopened the digital logs from Rob's estate's Wi-Fi router. At 11:41 p.m., someone connected to the network with a device labeled T__KitePad, Tracy's known tablet. That tablet had not been seen since the night of the murder. She claimed she lost it, but the router log confirmed it. The device was present, online, and transferring files to a local drive. Which drive? The one found charred in the fire pit. Suddenly, all the puzzle pieces locked together. A forged note, a burned will, a missing tablet, a device connection, a single surviving page. All of it. Traceable. All of it. Twisted into a frame job. And yet, as of now, no official charges have been filed against Tracy. Why? Because intent is hard to prove. But motive? It's all over the evidence. The money, the inheritance, the legacy, and the file Rob didn't want anyone to see. A file Tracy would do anything to destroy. Coming up.